It does not matter to us whether it is spectacular or not. Sometimes you play in an unspectacular way and you win. Other times you play very spectacularly and you lose. Fernando Santos, Portugal manager, 2016. The Euros is a special tournament. It's also a competition that seems to welcome the extraordinary, and more specifically, the underdog. 1992, Denmark wins after failing to even qualify. 2004, Greece win after being absolutely nobody's favorite. That same year, Porto win the Champions League and Arsenal go invincible. A wild year. Likewise, 2016 was also a year of surprises. Leicester City win the Premier League. Yes, Leicester. And Portugal won pretty big themselves. Okay, I know what some of you may be thinking. Portugal are no underdog nation. Look at the roster. But believe me when I tell you that they were not favored. This was an upset. Portugal had gone through decades of disappointment. Golden generations had come and gone. Scandals had been rife in the national team setup. There was disbelief in the system. They only won 2 games in this entire tournament in 90 minutes. But this is the moment that everything changed. It's a moment where a striker that doesn't score scores a goal more important than anyone else to ever wear Portuguese colors. It's a moment where the man that you'd think this story was written for wasn't even on the pitch. It's a moment where the team that was supposed to win tasted defeat. It's a moment that should not have happened, but it did. How? Hello everyone, hope you're all doing well. Welcome back to the channel. Buckle up, we're going deep today. As a footballing nation, Portugal is blessed. Truly. There's a reason why they have the second most Ballon d'Or wins by nation. Of course, it doesn't help that number 1 is propped up by... To be fair, Portugal don't have much of a leg to stand on here, but I digress. Despite all of the talent that this nation has boasted throughout history, they had to wait until the late 2010s to capture their first piece of silverware. Why? A lot of reasons. One of them being that they haven't always been that good, and another being, well, bad luck. Though the World Cup and the Euros have been around since 1930 and 1958 respectively, Portugal were a little late to join the party for both competitions. The first World Cup ever in 1930 was invite only, and Portugal were not invited. But it was only a 14-team tournament back then, and it wasn't taken all too seriously. Plus, the Egyptians missed their boat, so it was actually a 13-team tournament. Qualification was introduced in the 1934 edition, but Portugal failed to qualify after losing 11-1 to Spain on aggregate over a 2-leg tie. Yeah, you heard me correctly. I guess I should mention that Spain won the first leg 9-0 in Madrid, and then the second one, 2-1 in Lisbon, home ground advantage, am I right? They failed to qualify for the 1938 World Cup too, and since there were bigger things to worry about in the world than football, no World Cups happened until 1950, a tournament which they also failed to qualify for, because Spain beat them 7-2 on aggregate in qualifiers. It's a bit of a trend, you see. They were handed a lifeline though. Turkey qualified but had to pull out because of financial and logistical reasons. The tournament was held in Brazil as times were understandably tough in Europe as well as the whole world following a war. Portugal were asked to play in their place. However, they refused. I couldn't find the exact reasoning behind this, but I can only imagine that it had something to do with the finances, lack of adequate practice time, etc. and etc. Problems everyone had. They didn't qualify for the 1954, 58 or 62 World Cups either, even suffering a 9-1 aggregate defeat to Austria in the 54 qualifiers. Tough. The UEFA Euros was founded in 1958, but we don't have to dwell too much on that for now. Portugal never qualified until 1984. In between all of this, Portugal experienced their greatest World Cup performance to this very day, 1966, England. A World Cup filled with success that was never before felt and some controversy that's still debated almost 58 years later. The group stages saw them drawn against Hungary, Bulgaria, and Brazil, the defending champions. That's quite the introduction. Despite this, they went undefeated throughout the group stages, beating Bulgaria and Hungary and drawing to Brazil. Disaster struck in the quarterfinals as North Korea took a 3-0 lead against Selekau within 25 minutes. This is when the Ballon d'Or holder at the time, Eusebio, stepped in and worked his magic. A hat-trick and an inspired performance led to Portugal running out 5-3 winners, a match that many will not forget. For the reasons you think, and also for reasons a bit more questionable, a lot of people think that England were already predetermined to win the World Cup in 1966. This is apparently due to a plot devised by FIFA, the English FA, the CIA, the Illuminati, Kiflom, you name it. And there may be merit to those claims. England were the host nation and had made it to the semi-finals with a strong team themselves. Portugal were up next for them. This match was supposed to take place at Goodison Park, the same stadium where Portugal completed their miraculous comeback against North Korea. However, at the last minute, the venue was changed from Goodison Park to Wembley, an overnight train journey back in '66. The rationale for this last-minute switch was commercial reasons. Wembley did have about 30,000 more seats, so fair enough, but this meant that the Portuguese team spent much of their resting time traveling. It's worth noting that England played every single one of their matches in Wembley during this World Cup. Eusebio scored a late goal for Portugal, but it wasn't enough for England, who won the match thanks to 2 wonderfully taken goals by Sir Bobby Charlton. To make matters worse, 2 penalty appeals in favor of Portugal were waved off by the referee. To many, this Portugal side were victims of a fix, but they weren't the only ones. So get this, Argentina's training ground in Birmingham had no goalposts when they arrived. Before their quarter-final match, their accommodation was booked through an English travel agent who had said they would put them up in central London. They were placed in Welwyn, about an hour and 20 minutes out. England scored a goal in the final that has since been proven to not have been a goal, just as much as it's been proven to actually have been a goal. Did this cross the line? Controversial is the word I'm looking for. Anyway, none of that is important. This is Portugal's story. They went on to secure 3rd place overall by beating the Soviet Union in the 3rd place playoff. Eusebio finished this tournament off with 9 goals, which, of course, earned him the Golden Boot. Not bad for Portugal's first ever World Cup appearance, right? They only qualified for 1 World Cup in the 36 years that followed. The World Cup may not be Portugal's competition, which isn't exactly something to be ashamed or sad about. It's literally a competition contested by every single nation. Initially, this team wasn't able to do much on the European stage either. However, in the years after this generation, the entire picture changed. Since their first appearance in the Euros in '84, they've made it past the quarterfinals in all but 3 of the editions they've qualified for, which is 8 out of 10 of them, which is great stuff, but a lot like every other nation, disappointment and controversy has followed them throughout the years and throughout the competitions. The 1984 Euros was a special competition for Portugal, their first appearance in yet another major competition, and just like it was with their first World Cup appearance, they went further than some may have thought they would, progressing past the group stage that contained West Germany, Spain, and Romania in 2nd place. They got to the semis where a Michel Platini-led France awaited them. This match is still described as one of the most exhilarating displays of football in the competition's history. Tension, nerves, and drama were the order of the day. France were the aggressors, but Portugal were dangerous throughout. After regulation time, the team went to extra time with a 1-1 scoreline. Portugal drew first blood, but unfortunately, France rallied, scoring twice in 5 minutes. Minute 114 and 119, 3-2 to France. At the very least, Portugal can take solace in the fact that France went on to win the whole thing. After impressing with a fantastic '84 Euros, next up was the '86 World Cup in Mexico. This was only Portugal's 2nd World Cup appearance, so there was high expectations leading up to this one. It was expected that they would do quite well here. They did not. Instead, Selecao did not make it out the group, and their whole campaign was marred by leaks and controversy. This wonderful period in human history is affectionately known as the Saltillo Affair, after Saltillo, the Mexican city where Portugal was stationed during the tournament. The tournament was doomed from the start, as veteran defender Antonio Veloso tested positive for banned substances and was cut from the tournament. To add insult to injury, The test was proven to be false shortly after. The team trained on inclined surfaces and played practice matches against local barmen and hotel employees because no suitable warm-up opponents were prepared. Players wanted to shop around during their off days, but were bombarded by the people of the town and time constraints. Instead, a local politician's grandson volunteered to do the shopping for them while they remained at their hotel. He disappeared with their money. Many of the players were invited to private parties in luxury mansions, which I assume happens at every major tournament to this day. The difference here is that word of these players cheating on their wives back home made national headlines in Mexico and Portugal. After that, the phones of the Portuguese players, coaches, and staff never stopped ringing. But the most significant event was a strike by the players. They were underpaid. They were paid the lowest of any team at the tournament, and none of the money paid from kit and gear sponsors was shared with them. The federation pocketed the money and never even used it on the team, as evidenced by their poor training conditions and accommodation. In protest, players trained in inside-out shirts or without shirts entirely to hide sponsor logos. Portugal won their opening game against England, but unfortunately lost to Poland and Morocco, which decreased the validity of their claims that they deserved more money to some people. But most people, including the media, were on their side. This whole thing led to a standoff between the Portuguese FA and the players, where 8 senior players were banned and actual football took a back seat. The players' union began to grow in strength from then on, but significant damage was done to football in Portugal by this point. They came into this one in good form, but it would be 10 more years before they qualified for another major competition. By 2000, Portugal were again amongst the world's elite and were there to stay this time. Rui Costa, Jorge Costa, Pauleta, Vitor Bay, and of course, Luis Figo were all regulars in the squad. They reached the semis in the 2000 Euros, but were again knocked out by France. This was a messy episode though. A correctly called handball against Portugal in the 117th minute was met with physical protests by Portuguese players. Abel Xavier, Nuno Gomes, and Paulo Bento, all 3 were hit with bans ranging from 6 to 9 months for throwing insults and shoving the referee. Again, France went on to win the whole thing. The 2002 World Cup saw history repeat itself. Like 1986, Portugal came in after a great Euros performance. A player was banned for doping before it all kicked off. Players were accused of focusing on shopping and not football. Preparation was subpar. And to top it all off, Luis Figo, the best player on the planet, was carrying an ankle injury. Group stage exit. Plus, there were even more player protests based on unsatisfactory pay. And then we have the tournament that Portugal really should have won, but did not. The one that got away. The 2004 Euros, hosted in Portugal. This team were the favorites to win it for far more reasons than just being the hosts. Just look at this squad, including some of the players I've already mentioned. Now we have Paulo Ferreira, Ricardo Carvalho, Deco, and a 19-year-old Cristiano Ronaldo. This was their year. They topped their group to go through, then beat England and the Netherlands on their way to the final. Interestingly, they had only lost 1 match throughout the entire tournament, the opening match against Greece, a team that nobody thought twice about when it came to lifting the trophy. They faced Portugal in the final and won. An incredible defensive display by the Greeks meant the Portuguese, with all their firepower, were left with no answers. People still lament this win to this very day, calling it anti-football, calling it cynical, calling it all sorts of names. And yet, this picture exists. It's real. They won. The Portuguese press were amongst the first to call Greece out on their defensive football, which is fair, but extremely ironic. We'll get into why in a bit. This elimination marked the end of what many believe was Portugal's greatest golden generation. Important players retired, but at the very least, Cristiano Ronaldo was shaping up to be more than simply generational. He wasn't loved by the English though. In the 2006 World Cup quarterfinals, Wayne Rooney stamped on a Portuguese player and it was correctly called as a foul. After Portuguese protests, Rooney was sent off. Ronaldo led the protests. The cameras captured a wink that made English blood boil. Then he became the best player in the world a year later, playing for an English side, and all was forgiven. Portugal were knocked out in the semi-finals in 2006 though. France, again. Despite this, Portugal now had a sustained foothold at the top level. Massive credit needs to go to Luis Scolari, who coached them between 2003 and 2008. He oversaw qualification to every major competition for Seleção, including a Euros final in 2004, a World Cup semi-final in 2006, and a Euros quarter-final in 2008. The next years were very mixed for Portugal, many highs and lows. Lows including the 2010 and 2014 World Cup. The tactics were essentially Ronaldo and Inshallah. Highs included qualification to the 2014 World Cup. A 2-game playoff versus Sweden would decide who would go to the final tournament. An insane Ronaldo hat-trick and a Zlatan Ibrahimovic brace in the second leg provided us with one of the most exciting qualifying matchups of the century. 3-2 to Portugal saw them go through and basically secured the 2014 Ballon d'Or for CR7. By now, Portugal were a strong contender in every competition they entered, but there was still doubt that they would come out on top when all things were said and done. They were almost never favorites. Instead, just a good team that can produce magic, an opinion that wouldn't change despite what happened next. Former international Paulo Bento had been Portugal manager between 2010 and 2014 and didn't do much by the way of impressing the public. He was sacked to make room for Fernando Santos, a longtime manager that coincidentally was managing Greece in his previous job, managing AEK Athens, Panathinaikos, and PAOK dating back to 2001. He also came into this job with an existing 8-match ban for verbally abusing a linesman during a Euros qualifying match. By this point in his managerial career, the then 60-year-old had built up a reputation for being pragmatic and adaptable, focusing on achieving results over playing pretty football. His time with Greece stands as testament. Despite winning the Euros 2004, Greece was never a strong team. As Otto Rehagel, the previous Greece coach, had done before him, Santos uses the tools at his disposal to great effect. Rehagel is best remembered for focusing on tight, frustrating defense, and Santos had that in him too, but his approach was slightly more varied. His teams knew when to attack and weren't afraid to push forward. Greece made it to the knockouts of both the 2014 World Cup and the 2012 Euros. To this date, before that and after that, the only time they've ever done so was when they won in 2004. As Greece manager, Santos achieved a record of 26, 17, and 6 in all competitions, with 2 of those losses coming in friendlies, a very impressive record given the circumstances. So there was a clear brand of football to reference here. He created strong bonds with his players in his time with Greece, and the country had embraced him. He had also managed all 3 of the biggest Portuguese clubs of all time at different intervals. Now, it was time to put that familiarity to good use. Paulo Bento had been sacked after losing his first qualifying match to Albania, but after Santos had taken over, Portugal won all 6 of their remaining matches to top their group. Each match was won by a single goal. These guys weren't dominant, but they were getting the job done. Even still, they needed a little extra before they were Euro ready. Santos did well to provide it. And this was despite the fact that Dani, Thiago, Bernardo Silva, and Fabio Contrao were all out because of injury. Here's how the team looked going into and during the Euros. Firstly, he shored up the defense by encouraging more order and discipline. A back 4 that did little by the way of pushing up the pitch and maintained a solid line at the back. It helped that his defense was filled with experience and maturity to begin with. Pepe, Jose Font, Cedric, and the only defender that dared to venture forward, Rafael Guerreiro. All players that had the aptitude to be given a plan and stick to it. The midfield was set up in a 4-4-2 that was more often than not a diamond, anchored by William Carvalho or Danilo Pereira. But apart from that, the remaining midfielders rotated their starting positions routinely, based on the opposition and the specific tactics Santos wanted to play. João Moutinho, Adrian Silva, and André Gomes, naturally forward-thinking players, interchanged between 8 and 10, going wide or central as required. João Mario and Renato Sanchez were the all-action midfield aggressors. Renato Sanchez was only 18 at the time, but was making a lot of noise at Benfica. He was key in a lot of Portugal's matches in this tournament and was brilliant throughout. Up top was an interesting choice. Cristiano Ronaldo and Nani, both naturally wingers, both deployed as a striking partnership. Nani played central as a traditional 9, and Ronaldo was given freedom to roam. Ricardo Quaresma, the genius technical dribbler, was no longer the player he once was and was reserved for the bench. But his impact was not small. With this set of players, Portugal entered the Euros as qualifying group winners, but they were nowhere near the strongest team going into it, based on form. Did they have what it takes? Germany had Joachim Löw, France had Didier Deschamps, Italy had Antonio Conte, Spain had Vicente del Bosque, England had Roy Hodgson, and Portugal had a man whose last trophy had been the Greek Football Cup in 2002. Some big contrasts. Portugal needed the element of luck, which they most definitely got. Even with the strength of the individuals that they had, this team failed to win a single one of their group stage matches. Looking back on this record is actually quite remarkable, given how things turned out. Don't get me wrong, matches like their 3-3 draw versus Hungary were all-time classics. Some incredible goals here too. A Zoltan Gera thunderbolt, a Ronaldo heel flick, and a towering header from a Quaresma cross, a goal made in Sporting almost 2 decades prior. But a team that was this, well, let's be honest, lackluster, did they stand a chance? Well, under the rules of every Euro before this one, yep, every single one, no, they did not. You see, before the 2016 Euros, only 16 teams participated. The top 2 teams from 4 groups would go through to the first knockout stage, the quarterfinals, and we go from there. This edition saw 24 teams participate, adding an additional knockout stage. This was made possible as the 4 best third-ranked teams also progressed, leaving 16 teams going into the new round of 16 knockout phase and only 8 teams being knocked out after the group stages. Portugal finished 3rd in their group and were the 3rd best third-ranked team overall. A lucky break, but their fortunes were far from over. In the round of 16, Portugal faced Croatia. This was before Croatia made it to the finals of the 2018 World Cup, but this nation was still seen as a strong dark horse. Luka Modric, Ivan Rakitic, Ivan Perisic, and Mario Mandzukic, and more, made them a dangerous side. They were better than Portugal. Simple as. The stats and the eye test confirms it. But Portugal did what they did best this year and frustrated the Croats. It took 117 minutes for the deadlock to be broken, as Ricardo Quaresma scored off a rebounded Ronaldo shot. The quarterfinals against Poland was much more evenly matched, but all the same, no team was able to win in regular time. Lots of credit needs to be given to Renato Sanches for an inspired midfield performance, and for scoring the equalizer that cancelled Robert Lewandowski's opener for Poland. It took penalties to decide this one, and Portugal had the nerve to see it through. When you make it to the final 4 of any competition, you're entitled to start dreaming, even if your performances haven't exactly been convincing. At this point, this team had made it to the semi-finals of the Euros and was yet to win a single match in regular time. For those reasons, at the time, Fernando Santos wasn't given the credit he probably deserved. Yes, Portugal were lucky in a lot of ways, but to get to these levels requires more than just luck. They had left opponents feeling tired and frustrated. Then, they just seemed to keep pushing on. It was only after they defeated a Gareth Bale-led Wales that people seemed to start giving the tactics some praise. Nani and Ronaldo caused huge problems to this Wales side, scoring 1 apiece in a 2-0 win, and the defense remained as solid as ever. It's worth noting that Belgium were one of the favorites to win this whole thing. Wales defeated them pretty comfortably in the previous round. They were a confident, capable side. Portugal played a friendly match in the Stade de France in 2014, just after Santos had taken over. In an interview after the Wales win, Santos said the following: "I called my players together in the Stade de France and told them that our goal was to be right back here 2 years later for the final of Euro 2016. Now we have a final to play, and I don't just want to play it, I want to win it." This was already a fairy tale. All the same, nobody would have blamed you for thinking that it was about to come to a close. In the finals, they faced the hosts, France. France were monstrous this year. They had been the best team in the competition, scoring the most goals, 13, having the best goal difference, +9, fielding the strongest team on paper and in real life. Just look at this lineup. Paul Pogba, when he was actually good and consistent. N'Golo Kante, fresh off winning the Premier League with Leicester. 2016 Dimitri Payet, the streets will never forget. Hugo Lloris while he was in the form of his life. And, of course, Mr. Consistent, Antoine Griezmann. This was maybe his best year ever to date. Sublime for Atletico, more importantly, sublime for France. So, France were the host nation, had won the previous 2 tournaments held at home, had this weird thing where they won a Euros every 16 years, dating back to their inaugural win in 1984, and they had the best set of players that the tournament had to offer. Let's also not forget that before this, France had faced Portugal 3 times in knockout rounds of a World Cup or Euros and had knocked them out each and every time. But I guess Santos and Portugal decided not to read the odds or something. The lineup was similar to how it had been all throughout the tournament, a 4-4-2. Pepe and William Carvalho had been missing due to injury and suspension respectively, but were back for the final. The game was underway. France were expected to look the better side in this one, so there was no surprise when they did from the get-go. But even though Portugal had a plan going in, it didn't seem to matter anyway, because literal disaster struck a quarter of the way through the match. Dimitri Payet and Ronaldo clashed in the 17th minute, causing Ronaldo very visible discomfort. He tried to go on, but it just wasn't happening. He had to come off. The tears from the agony of 2004's loss to Greece were replaced with a new set. 12 years later, I'm sure a lot of people in the Stade de France thought the result would be the same. The greatest player in the history of his country, the greatest player ever to many, especially back in 2016, in a match where Portugal needed him most, fate would not allow it. Santos had to rethink everything. This was truly his moment to shine. The reason why he will always deserve respect regardless of current opinions. Quaresma came on to replace Ronaldo, and Portugal switched to a 4-5-1. This packed the midfield and gave Portugal answers for every question Didier Deschamps had for them, and more. They were willing to defend deep and weren't in any rush to push forward recklessly. Ronaldo, now resigned to the sidelines, was consistently pictured shouting orders at his teammates. I'm sure there are rules against players doing this. I'm pretty sure the technical area is reserved for coaches. And again, this is Cristiano Ronaldo. Who was gonna tell this man otherwise? No one is the correct answer. And then it happened. Divine intervention. The most important decision of Fernando Santos' entire career. Some would say life. The clock hit 77 minutes. France were starting to look more and more threatening. Portugal weren't much of a threat with Nani as the lone striker. They needed a target man. In stepped Eder.
There's a forward with not a very good goal-scoring record.
Having had a fairly average career thus far, he was the definition of an unsuspecting hero. He had played a total of 13 minutes for Portugal in this tournament, all of them in the group stages. To this day, he has only scored 5 goals at international level, and only 1 of them in a competitive match. Information that doesn't actually matter because that 1 counts for more than almost any goal any Portuguese player has ever scored for Portugal. It all came down to extra time. Rafael Guerreiro hit the crossbar. André Pierre Gignac hit the post. Griezmann missed a fair few chances. Sissoko took so many shots, anyone could have taken it. A stalemate in regular time. Not surprising for Portugal. They had played a whole 60 minutes more of football than the hosts, including 2 penalty shootouts. They were no strangers to long battles. But as for France, this was the first time in this tournament that they'd been dragged into waters this deep. Their concentration was about to be put to a whole new test. A test that Laurent Koscielny failed. 108 minutes gone. Eder gets the ball on the left with his back to the goal and wriggles free. He goes right and all of a sudden is surrounded by Samuel Umtiti, Paul Pogba, Blaise Matuidi, as well as Koscielny right behind him. Patrice Evra and Bakary Sagna are blocking any passing lanes out wide. He was alone with seemingly no options, yet nobody was closing him down. It's almost as if they were inviting him to shoot, which I guess makes sense. They were all tired. Plus, more importantly, this guy doesn't pose a threat, right?
Not got much help. Oh, he doesn't need any help!
Well, Ronaldo had completely forgotten that he had a bum knee, and was jumping for joy. Portugal not only held on, but kept attacking, coming close to a second, and after 120 minutes, Portugal made history. In the following years, Portugal have maintained their position as an elite nation, and even won the inaugural 2019 Nations League, a competition that not everyone takes seriously. I mean, this isn't the place to debate it, but it seems that players take it seriously, so why not, I guess. Portugal haven't come close to another final since the 2016 competition, and perhaps it will be some time before they do once more. Fernando Santos went from hero to zero in the space of a few years as Portugal's results and gameplay dipped in quality. Ask any average Portuguese fan what they think of him on Twitter, and they will refer to him as a terrorist. A rift with Cristiano Ronaldo surely couldn't have helped his case. There was only ever gonna be one winner here. However, don't get anything twisted, the future of Portuguese football is very bright. Many of the young players are still maturing and have a lot to offer. Ronaldo is still kicking. Heck, he scored the most goals out of anyone in 2023 at 38 years of age, but taking things back to 2016, none of that seemed to matter. History had already been made. I'm sorry I keep bringing up 2004, but the comparisons and similarities are too strong to ignore. France were resigned to the fate of Portugal back in 2004. For some reason, the universe decided to play a good old-fashioned reverse card. A host nation, a team in great form, a team with great players, a final appearance, a 1-0 scoreline, eliminated. Add on the fact that Portugal were missing a man that has an airport named after him, and what you have is nothing short of a miracle. And then we have Eder, a lord, some might say. He's a very interesting case. In the aftermath of all of it, this trophy is still referred to as Ronaldo's trophy, which it is. He carried Portugal through dark times for over a decade. But let's all show some love for Eder. By the time the trophy was being lifted, he had faded into the background as the superstars of the team stole the picture show. And fair enough, he only popped up for a moment. All the same, man oh man, was that a moment. Ironically, since then, Eder hasn't really made the front page of headlines of most newspapers, not in the way that many of the other Portuguese players have. And when you look at the entire picture, in a way, in a funny way, Eder is the perfect metaphor for Portugal in 2016. An unlikely victor, a dark horse, a threat that nobody considered until it was too late. And there we have it. Let me know what you guys think about Portugal and their crazy history. Loved making this one. Feel free to follow the socials. Feel free to subscribe. That's all for me today. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you're having a great day. Cheers, and I will catch you in the next one.